Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
And a very good evening to you. I do hope we find you well on this Wednesday evening. Nice to have your company. Howard, thank you very much indeed. I hope you're hearing me loud and clear, or loudly and clearly. Thanks a million for Spain today. And Howard will be back with us tomorrow between 6 and 7. I hope that you enjoy your glass of vino tinto and maybe something nice for Luna a little later on as well. I loved the music on both programs, on the program, both pieces of music. Sorry, I'm a little bit jittery, and the reason for the jitters is that I'm back in Spain, but I'm not in the studio. I'm actually in my home studio, and I want to make sure that this is all working well, and hopefully it is all good and everything is a-okay. In fact, I'm just going to do a quick test, if you don't mind. So hang on there for just 1 second. Yeah, that's all good. Alrighty, if there's any issue, if I vanish, text me, will you? Just so I know for sure. Anyway, what have we got for you tonight on Talk Radio Europe? Well, there we go. Let's have a look and see. The reports are coming in that it can be heard loud and clear. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. Great news. What do we have for you tonight on the programme between now and 9 o'clock? Now that I know we're all settled. Well, Patricia is back with us this evening, and she's going to talk to us about one of Ireland's great cities. She's in the middle of a series on talking about the various cities, and we kind of do one in the north, one in the south, one in the north, one in the south. So we're back south again this evening, and I'm looking forward to hearing that, and that will be in the first hour of the programme. Melanie Lynch is going to join me in the second hour. And Melanie is, she's basically the woman in charge of a project called Her Story. All one word, Her Story, all right? And they've recently launched an exhibition which is called Peace Heroines Exhibitions. And it's all to do with the women that were in the background and came to the foreground and were hugely influential and hugely important in the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. And I know there was a lot about this back around the time of the anniversary. But Melanie and her colleagues were extremely busy, as you can imagine, at that time. And so it's only now that I'm getting a chance to talk to her. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the Peace Heroines exhibition tonight when I talk to her between 8 and 9 on the programme. We'll have some good music for you, as per usual. We'll try to get as many new songs in there as we possibly can, and maybe one or two that you're already familiar with. I have some music that was released last week, and I have some music that's only released today on the programme. But we're going to start with a story that I suppose if there was a G2 tonight with George Lee, we'd be talking about this at the very start without a shadow of a doubt. The Minister for Integration has told Clare TDs. Now, this is something that's happening literally out the road from where I would normally be when I'm in Ireland. So the Minister for Integration has told Clare TDs that senators, and senators, that it is not an option to close a hotel in Inch in County Clare, which is housing asylum seekers at present. Now, protests by local people are continuing, with locals blocking the access road to the centre. Clare politicians met Minister Roderick O'Gorman this morning to outline local concerns about the unsuitability of the Magona House Hotel to house 29 male asylum seekers. Local people want the hotel, which is around 8 kilometres from Ennis, to be closed to asylum seekers, and say that this is the only resolution satisfactory to them. Minister O'Gorman gave no commitment on that, saying that the closure of the premises to men seeking international protection is not an option. Meanwhile, protests by local people are continuing. Traffic cones and no entry signs are erected on the rural road leading to the hotel. Local people's attitudes appear to be hardening. They say that a lot of mistrust has built up over conflicting information that they have been given over the numbers being housed there. and that this is not helping at all towards any resolution. The 29 people were brought by bus to Ennis this morning to access local Department of Social Protection Services. On Monday evening, 33 asylum seekers were brought by bus to the hotel, and after their arrival, local people blocked both ends of the hotel road with tractors and silage bales. The former hotel and restaurant in Inch has been closed since 2019. Locals said that there has been no consultation with them and that the property and its location was unsuitable to house asylum seekers. Last year, it was deemed unsuitable for asylum seekers accommodation because of fire and sewage issues. Local people say that the only satisfactory resolution is for the decision to house asylum seekers to be reversed. Talks also took place last night for several hours between the local community, Fianna Fáil Senator Timmy Dooley and the operator of the hotel. While some progress was reported, further discussions were deemed necessary. Senator Dooley said that there had been good engagement and goodwill shown on all sides. Ennis Councillor and Deputy Mayor Mary Howard said that she believes it will be very difficult to find a resolution to end the protests, adding that the lack of prior communication about the move has been appalling. In addition, she said that people are hearing conflicting reports about the numbers being accommodated at the hotel, which Ms. Howard said is adding to local concerns. She added that people are genuinely fearful about a large group of men who are arriving into a quiet rural area with no infrastructure to support them. Ms. Howard believes the accommodation is unsuitable, is cramped and located too far from the nearest shop or town. She said that County Clare is one of the most multicultural counties in the country and has welcomed different nationalities for many decades, with people now integrated into the community and children attending schools all over Clare. Last night, Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said that he did not believe that it was necessary for protesters to block access to the hotel. The Taoiseach acknowledged that while in the vast majority of cases those seeking refuge have been accepted into local communities, in some cases such engagement has not gone well. That story is the biggest story in Ireland since last Monday evening, and a number of it has just been the headlines across newspapers, radio programmes, TV programmes and so on, and it's going to continue for a considerable period of time. I'm familiar with the people involved, I'm familiar with the location and all of that. So we'll see what the next couple of days or weeks might bring. I didn't tell you at the start, but if you would, I'm settling down now, you see, if you would like to get in contact at any stage, you're more than welcome to do so. Our WhatsApp machine is all cranked up and paid. You can send a text via WhatsApp to +34 645 99 67 95, or you can send an email to studio@tre.radio. Whichever one suits you will be fine and dandy with me. I did mention that we had some new music on the programme, a lot of new music, hopefully, on the programme this evening between now and 9 o'clock. This was released only last week.
Something with driving down these roads, through the city in its night glow. One last dance before we go. Clock runs, game falls. Now we're ready to let go. Another story to be told. Lose the script, no plot holes. Clock runs, game falls. All skies will part, new start, fix you. I'll wait, no tears on you. All skies will part, new start, fix you. I'll wait, no tears on you. All skies will part, new start, fix you. I'll wait, no tears on you. All skies will part, new start, fix you. I'll wait, no tears on you.
That's magic stuff, isn't it? Yeah. Released last Wednesday. That's a band calling themselves Four Faces. And that song that's called Old Scars, as I said, released only last week. They're Dublin based and they're described as being indie synth or synth as in synthetic or synthesizers or whatever, rock band. And the lads involved in the band, Tommy Malone is on bass, Diarmuid Goggins on drums, Owen Butterfield on lead guitar. They were all school friends, childhood friends anyway. And then a couple of years back, they met up with a fella called Daniel French, and he's on vocals and guitar in there. And that's who you've been listening to. Four Faces, Old Scars. I like their sound. Check them out if you like them as well. We've got more music for you between now and 9 o'clock. We've got more stories for you as well. And it's good to be back with you on the radio. Yeah, sure. It's been since last Friday. I took the ferry last Friday night. I sailed at midnight and arrived in Bilbao. I think it was about 6 o'clock or 6:30. And we disembarked at 8. And just smashing. I had a long journey then. The length of Spain took me 10 hours, but it was lovely. Enjoyed it immensely. Just me, the road and the radio. It was grand. Yeah. And that's the great thing about when you're moving through the country. And because it's so hilly as well, so mountainous in Spain, you get radio stations for a period of time and then you've got to shift and move on. So it kind of helps you to discover new things and hear different things as well, which was nice. And the sailing itself with Brittany Ferries on the Salamanca was just heavenly. It was gorgeous. I spent the day chilling out on Saturday on board. I was straight to the cot. I was straight to the cot on Friday night because I'd been up at 5:30 on Friday. And I was on board at about 10:30, which was lovely. And into the cot, and that was it. Gone for the night. And we'd plain sailing all the way. Nice, calm weather as well. Fabulous. What a way to go. You'd never know that Brittany Ferries were the sponsor for the programme. She wouldn't. No. But anyway, it works out well. It does indeed. Do you know what I'll do? I think I'll take a quick break. Come back to me just after that. And then I'll give you more news and we'll play more music as well. How's that, yeah?
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
TRE. Talk Radio Europe.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
You're welcome back to the programme. Nice to have your company on this Wednesday evening. I've got to do something about the sound in this room. Actually, the door is open because I'm on my own and I thought I could leave the door open, but I might close it when I get a chance to do that. I mentioned to you that the biggest story in Ireland at the moment was the one that I started the programme with. Based in County Clare. Well, the second biggest story yesterday was the Minister for the Environment, Eamon Ryan, is going to write to his cabinet colleagues to inform them that their departments must implement the Public Sector Climate Action Mandate 2023. This aims to ensure that public sector bodies lead in reducing Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions. All right? The measures which were passed by Cabinet yesterday, include phasing out of the use of parking in buildings where there is access to good transport services or there are mobility sharing options for the majority of staff or visitors. However, parking will be maintained for people with physical mobility issues or staff who may work shifts or out of hours. A departmental spokesperson said that there are no hard criteria on how each department should decide on the rules or a hard date for which the measures would be implemented or should be implemented, but added that it will be decided by green teams in each department who are responsible for complying with the overall climate action plan. The mandate applies to all public sector bodies, with the exception of local authorities, commercial semi-state bodies and the school sector. Among other designated tasks will be to ensure the end of the use of disposable cups, plates and cutlery from public sector canteens or closed facilities, except for those in clinical or health settings such as public coffee shop, maybe the public coffee shops in hospitals, all right? Relevant public sector bodies will be obliged to promote the use of push and electric bikes, as well as the buying or leasing of zero emission vehicles only. The plan also envisages ending the installation of heating systems that use fossil fuels in new buildings or renovation/refit projects after this year. Oh, here we go. As I said, that was a big talking point yesterday, and you can see why it was as well. Now, here's something that I was very interested in because I use them. And if you're packing to go on your holidays, or maybe you happen to be living in Spain and you have electrical equipment that you brought with you from Ireland or from the UK, this might be of interest to you as well. Or if you're going the other direction from Spain, maybe across to Ireland or the UK, holidaymakers have been warned to take care when using travel adapters this summer after testing of a number of adapters resulted in the recall of thousands of products. So far, 7,600 travel adapters have been recalled and 6,200 have been withdrawn from sale. The travel adapter testing was conducted by the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, that's the CCPC, as part of a Europe-wide safety campaign. Now, among the products recalled was a travel adapter sold in Harvey Norman, branded G&BL Universal Multi-Travel Adapter, and also the Home Sale Universal USB Travel Adapter sold in various retail outlets. The CCPC has warned of the risk of fire and electrocution associated with some adapters and are advising holidaymakers to be cautious when plugging electrical products into adapters. The CCPC Director of Communications is a girl called Grania Griffin, and she said that travel adapters can be a particularly risky product for consumers because even when an individual product is compliant, if it's used incorrectly, then it becomes unsafe. Don't use adapters to plug in always-on items or extension leads, as this can cause a fire. Travel adapters are designated for short-term use only and should be unplugged when not in use. I didn't know that. I didn't. And actually, what is kind of powering the desk that I'm sitting at with a number of electrical items at the moment is an adapter in the wall and a socket board taken off it. So I'm going to have to reevaluate how I do all this based on that. Don't use adapter. Oh yeah, I mentioned that. Travel adapters are designed, as I said, for short-term use only. She said, this lady, Grania Griffin, said that the CCPC is continuing to engage with suppliers and other EU product safety bodies to prevent unsafe products from reaching retailers and consumers. The CCPC also advises that travel adapters are not overloaded when in use, as they are designated or designed for use with low energy consumption devices, and unplugging the adapter when finished when leaving accommodation or going to sleep. I do that anyway. I'm kind of good at that kind of stuff. The CCPC is responsible for making sure that a wide range of products sold in Ireland meet specific regulations, and this includes toys, domestic gas and electrical appliances, consumer personal protective equipment, and general consumer products like furniture and children's clothing. Another interesting thing that I heard today, or I either read it or heard it, I can't remember, it's been a long day, is that when you're using an adapter, all right, don't plug the adapter into the wall first and then plug in the device that you want to plug into the adapter. Do it the other way around before you plug in the adapter. So take the adapter in your hand, plug in the appliance, and then put the adapter in the wall. That is because sometimes the circuits don't actually close, or the little holes don't close, and so you can get a shock. I didn't know that either, but I think I kind of do that anyway, so that's all right. So there you go, no? The things you learn on Live on Eire. Unreal, isn't it? Stop. Go back. You're not supposed to be jumping in here in the middle of the song. You're supposed to be jumping in at the start of the song. New music from Ben O'Sullivan and Paddy King, who together they trade as 49th and Main. This is called Crash and Burn.
Hush, lullaby, the bright ocean. Down for the night, already hoping. You've been on my mind, and I'm not coping. So well. Hush, lullaby, the bright ocean. Down for the night, already hoping. You've been on my mind, and I'm not coping. I'm alone tonight, but Cody Cope.
Kind of one that you could kind of get a little you could be singing that all night in your head, couldn't you? Nice one. It comes from 49th and Main. It's their current single. It's called Crash and Burn. Ben O'Sullivan and Paddy King. They're from Kilkenny. Come on, the cats. And that's their current offering, and I like it. And you might hear it again on Live on Eire. Not tonight, obviously, but yeah, you might get a chance to hear it. There's a wonderful initiative after being announced in relation to museums and galleries across Ireland today, and I'm going to tell you all about it. But first, I want to do a quick break. Come back to me just after that. I'll tell you about that story, and then I will introduce to you Patricia Traynor.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
TRE. Talk Radio Europe.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
You're welcome back to the programme. As I said to you, a wonderful initiative was launched a little earlier on today, and it involves museums and galleries across Ireland. They're set to hold special evening and nighttime events over the coming months as part of a new government campaign to promote Ireland's cultural and heritage to a wider audience. The campaign, which builds on last year's pilot nighttime economy support scheme, includes almost €1 million in funding, which will be made available in grants for up to €10,000. It's specifically aimed at smaller museums and galleries across Ireland, which agree to host at least 4 evening or nighttime events lasting up to 9 p.m. between June and December of this year, and will be open to groups which are members of the Museum Standards Programme for Ireland and or a member of the Irish Museum Association. Launching the programme today, Arts Minister Catherine Martin said in addition to exhibitions already in place, daytime items, museums and galleries may also host film nights, wellbeing initiatives, live podcasts and poetry jams. International Museum Day is being marked this week, and we celebrate, she said, how museums and galleries throughout the country are the beating heart of culture in our communities. They are the keepers of our history, reflect our cultural identity, and provide a space for creativity which future generations can enjoy. They play a vital role in smaller towns and villages, supporting open conversations, promoting positive mental health, and are inclusive to all. Indeed, Irish Museums Association Director Gina O'Kelly said that the campaign could potentially rejuvenate the evening and nighttime cultural options open to people in Ireland. I think this is a brilliant idea. I do, because I love museums and galleries. I think they're just phenomenal. And I love, if you listened a couple of weeks ago when I was at the museum, the Old Irish Ways Museum outside Limerick City, I was talking to the owner of that, and as we walked around, you could sense the history, you could smell the history, and to touch something, you're touching something that is just so historic, and you wonder what it could tell you if it could speak. I know, daft I am, I know, but that's the kind of thing I like. Alrighty, Patricia joins us again this evening, I am glad to say, and she is going to continue her series on telling us about some of the great cities on the island of Ireland. I nearly pressed the wrong button there, Patricia. But anyway, so let's go straight to her this evening. Patricia.
Well, hello, Ger. Today I'm going to speak of Galway, which I know is your neck of the woods, really. It's amazing that although Galway has received a municipal charter from the Crown in 1484, it has only officially become a city under the Local Government Act in 2001. From the middle of the 13th century to the end of the 19th century, 14 families dominated the political, commercial and social life of Galway. They were called the Tribes of Galway. They were mainly of Anglo-Norman origin, with only 2 of Gaelic origin. The Anglo-Normans, who had arrived in 1169 at the request of the King of Leinster to recover his throne, had stayed and settled in Ireland and had become more Irish than the Irish themselves. They were united with the Irish in that they shared the Catholic faith. They joined in the Irish Confederate Wars from 1641 to 1653 against the English parliamentarians. However, in 1649, Cromwell led a large army which was ruthless in its conquest of Ireland. Galway was captured in 1652, and the tribes of Galway were punished, and their lands and property were confiscated. When Charles II came to the throne in 1660, the tribes regained some of their power. However, when William of Orange defeated King James II at the Battle of the Boyne, they were once again deprived of their properties. Galway still reveres those 14 families whose names today can be seen on the roundabouts in or around Galway. Their names are in navy blue and in Irish, so you can't miss them. Galwegians are proud to call themselves the City of the Tribes. Christopher Columbus came to Galway in 1477, and it said he went to pray in St. Nicholas's Collegiate Church. He also met William Harris, an Irishman who claimed that he had already gone to America before Columbus. However, That didn't prevent him from asking Columbus to allow him to join the crew on his voyage across the Atlantic. He was known on the ship as Guillermo, which is the Spanish for William. And so many people may not have known the Galway-born sailor was Irish. Apparently, Guillermo Hedis, as they called him, was one of the 38 men that Columbus left on Haiti to found the first European settlement. Unfortunately, the settlement did not last long, as they were all killed soon after. In 1992, a memorial to Christopher Columbus was erected in Galway to celebrate the quincentenary of his famous voyage in 1492. The monument is appropriately placed next to the Spanish Arch beside the River Corrib. Mind you, it's said that long before Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic, a 6th century Irish monk, St. Brendan, set forth from Ireland in a boat made of animal skins. Now, incredible as it may seem, there are authentic and well-researched Latin texts recounting the voyage. These texts date back at least to 800 AD, and they're kept in the archives of Galway University. This would mean that St. Brendan discovered America 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus. Obviously, some people may be sceptical as to the possibility of crossing the Atlantic Ocean in a boat made of animal skins. Among those who are sceptical was a man called Tom Severin, who decided to test it out for himself by making a replica of the curragh that Brendan would have sailed in. He used only the materials and building methods which St. Brendan would have used. The wooden frame of the curragh was covered with 49 animal skins, and then a coating of wool grease was added to help waterproof the hull. He set off with a small crew to confirm the possibility of crossing the Atlantic in a vessel similar to that of St. Brendan. He called his ship the Brendan. The journey was hard and took him 50 days, but he did manage to reach Newfoundland and thus proved that such a voyage is possible in a boat made of animal skins. Severin has written a book called The Brendan Voyage, which details his journey and reinforces his belief that St. Brendan could indeed have crossed the Atlantic 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus. St. Brendan lived to a ripe old age of 93. He died in Galway, and he is remembered by the name St. Brendan the Navigator. The people of Galway profess strong links with Spain. Many sailors of the Spanish Armada were shipwrecked off the coast of Galway, and the people of Galway buried them with dignity and piety. In 1988, a tribute plaque was unveiled to commemorate those sailors from the Spanish Armada who had perished 400 years earlier in 1588. There are people in Ireland today who claim they are descendants of the Spanish who were washed up on the shores of Galway. Irish literature is said to be the oldest in Europe, and it is thanks to a lady from Galway who decided to dedicate her time and literary talents to preserving that literature. Her name is Lady Augusta Gregory from Cool Park, County Galway. She travelled around the country collecting and preserving ancient stories of Irish heroes and myths and putting them down in writing for future generations. Wonderful stories such as those of Fionn McCool and Cuchulainn and the tales of the Fianna, which had been passed on orally from one generation to another. It's thanks to her that these stories were written down in Irish and then translated into English. Lady Gregory was one of the most influential figures in the Irish literary revival of the arts. She was also a co-founder of the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, together with William Butler Yeats. As I'm talking about Galway, I must just mention a restaurant in Malaga which is called Galway. It is situated on the Colmenar Road, leaving Malaga to go to Granada, and it is called Venta Galway. Now, the word Galway is often mispronounced by Spanish people as Galbe or Garbe. So where on earth did the name come from? Well, apparently, many years before it was a restaurant, it was one of those big, grand old houses of centuries gone by. Apparently, the house was built by an Irishman towards the end of the 18th century, and originally there was also a small church, a medical post, a school, which later became a post office, and then the quartel of the Guardia Civil, of the Civil Guard. In fact, it was almost like a little village, but all that remains today is the restaurant Venta Galway. The Irishman was John Galway. He was born in 1726 in Carrick-on-Suir in County Tipperary. His family were wealthy and of the nobility. John Galway had inherited a large fortune. Like many other members of the Irish Catholic nobility at the time, he left Ireland to come to Spain. The Irish nobility were extremely well received in Spain, and those who had noble titles were given equivalent titles in Spain. John Galway was admitted to the nobility of Spain in 1769, and in 1789 he was awarded the title of Knight of the Grand Cross of the Order of Carlos III of Spain. He also became a close friend of the Count of Floridablanca, who was the first minister of Spain in 1776. Galway was involved with the construction of the San Telmo aqueduct, and in the list of the founders of the Sociedad Económico de Amigos del País de Málaga, the Economic Society of Friends of the country, the name of John Galway appears on the 12th of October 1790. Imagine. Years later, John Galway's grandson, Edward Galway Molina, saw the advantages of opening a venta or a restaurant in a place which was frequented by carriages travelling between Malaga and Granada. The restaurant, the Galway, was bought in 1993 by Antonio Montagne, who was very interested to learn about the history of what is still called Venta Galway restaurant. Over the years, the word has changed from Galway to Galbe or even Garbe, but it is interesting to see how a restaurant in Malaga has the name of Galway. There was a theory that as people in Spain have two surnames, they have their father's surname and then their mother's surname, the Irishman who came over 3 centuries ago, having only one surname, had decided to add the name Galway to his name. But the fact is, the Irishman who came over already had the surname Galway. He played an important role in the life of Malaga 300 years ago. The last Spanish descendant bearing the name of Galway died in 1957. There is a mausoleum in the St. San Miguel cemetery in Malaga, which bears the name of John Galway. The city of Galway in Ireland was named European Capital of Culture in 2020. And it is no surprise. Galway is famous for its festivals and events. There are no less than 122 events a year. The Galway Film Festival, the Arts Festival, music festivals, the Galway Races, the Oyster and Seafood Festival, the Literature Festival, sports festivals, the list goes on and on. There's something for everyone. Galway is definitely a very exciting place to visit.
Came in from the west, a force that was spent, pushed through the ringer of parties and singing. Listen to her in, her down, springing, all tired and bothered by the fire and her mother. Home, 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 it's where you've gone. Home, 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 to play out the role. Give room to recover when life's path gets rougher. Come back on in, be yourself again. Away from life's dealings, the quiet and healing of home, 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 home. It's where you've gone. Home, 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 home. It's where you've gone. Always for sound, we scramble for a living, a wound to return to when unnerved by it all. Come back on in to the house on the hill, freedom, forgiveness, and a place to be still. Home, 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 home. It's where you've gone. Home, 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 home. It's where you've
I don't often play the same artist on the programme 2 weeks in a row, but I'm making an exception because I've got such wonderful feedback when I play The Whileaways. And so that's why I'm doing that. That's got a song called Home, but I'm also playing them because they're based in Galway, and it was just fitting, I thought, to come out of that with out of Patricia's story about Galway. And thanks, Patricia, much appreciated. And she's got there's a whole lot more cities to come over the next number of weeks and probably months. The next time that Patricia visits, we'll be going to Northern Ireland, for another one of the cities in Ireland, on the island of Ireland. And we have plans. Patricia, if you're listening, I sent you an email a little earlier on. You might take a look at that for me, if you wouldn't mind. There's no rush, no, nothing urgent. But so there you have it. Right. Oh, by the way, just to mention to you, that was the 102nd story that Patricia has told on Live on Eire. I know. Wow. And they're all available on a podcast series called Stories of Ireland and the Irish by Patricia Traynor, Trainor, or Google my name and you'll get them as well, wherever you happen to get your podcasts. All right. So Patricia Traynor, Trainor, or my name, Ger Sweeney, by the way, is my name. And that's it. Ger is spelled Ger, short for Germany. But I think I told you the story about I was playing golf with a fella. The good old days when the back was good. I was playing golf with a fella. He was an Englishman and we were in the golf buggy. And I said, we were on about the 14th hole. And he said to me, can I ask you a question? I said, you can, of course. And I said, are you expecting an answer? He said, yeah, please. I said, ask away anyway and see what happens. So he said, can I ask you what Ger is short for? I said, you can. I said, it's Gerard. He said, oh, thanks be to God, or something like that. And I said, why? He said, I was trying to think what it was short for, and the only thing I could think of was Geronimo. So no, Mammy and Eddie didn't christen me Geronimo. I might have told you that story before. If I did, forgive me, but it was just funny. I enjoyed it. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. Come back to me, and we're going to talk about things maritime. All to do with the sea. Just because I was on the Salamanca at the weekend. Now I think I'm a sailor. But yeah, there's a couple of stories I want to tell you about.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney. TRE.
Talk Radio Europe.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
You're welcome back. Nice to have your company on this Wednesday evening. Time is moving on. We're heading towards the international news at the top of the hour. That'll just take 2 minutes and I'll be back just after that. And I'll introduce our second guest in the second hour, but more about that a little later on. European and NATO naval chiefs have been meeting in Cork over the past 2 days to discuss the use of emergent and disruptive technologies, including Ireland's GUARD project. The annual Chiefs of European Navies, CHENS, the CHENS meeting was described by the Defence Forces as an informal, independent and non-political forum. The 27-member group is open to any European nation which is a member of the EU or NATO and has a navy. Representatives of the United States Navy deployed in Europe attended the sessions as observers, as did members of NATO's Allied Maritime Command. Ireland currently holds the presidency of the CHENS conference, having last hosted it in 2001. Emergent and disruptive technologies include artificial intelligence. That has me worried. It does. Quantum-enabled technologies, don't know what that is, biotechnology, hypersonic technologies, space and novel materials and manufacturing. The GUARD project is a collaboration between the Defence Forces, academia and private industry to develop a maritime smart drone capable of detecting drug smuggling at sea. Now that'd be a game changer, wouldn't it? Absolutely. So anyway, if that's all finished up, I'd say they're gone for a couple of pints after the 2 days' work. I'd say they are. Calls have been made for the European, this is a different story, by the way. Calls have been made for the European Union to take steps to help the Irish fishing industry, which is battling against a number of issues, including a post-Brexit cut to the Irish fish quota. A cross-party and multinational delegation of MEPs is meeting in the southwest or the southeast of the country this week to meet with fishing and coastal representatives and those working in the sector, and will compile a report with recommendations for the European Commission and the European Parliament. The MEPs met people in Dunmore East and Kilmore Quay yesterday, and hearing about their concerns, today they travelled on to Rosslare Harbour and Europort to find out more about the effects that Brexit has had on the area in the last number of years. CEO of the South and East Fisheries Producers Association, John Lynch, said that 41 Irish vessels are being decommissioned at present. That sounded like Sean Connery there, didn't they? Vessels. And that has brought a very negative vibe across the industry, and the loss of quota in the Brexit trade agreement with the UK is to blame, he said. According to Mr. Lynch, Ireland gave €43 million worth of fish out of 160 million. The European Union gave 160 million per annum worth of fish quota to the UK in the trade agreement, in Ireland, as I said, gave 43 million of that. Wow. Such a loss has an impact on the fishing fleet, he said, which is why so many vessels are going through a decommissioning scheme. He said that he hopes that the European Parliament delegation will be able to recommend steps to the EU Commission, which could help the sector. And we'll keep our fingers crossed on that for sure. There's a lovely vibe of this particular song. I hope that we've got long enough to give it a spin for you. The name of the group is Pigeon Millers. Seriously. They're based in Dublin. Doug Sheridan is their lead singer. Paddy Lyons, Ed Kelly and Steve Walker join him to make this wonderful sound. They've got a new single on release. It's called Windowsill. And here it is for you today.
Burned down my mind's eye, pushed as far as it could go. Walked from the high street to a ditch that no one knows. I made my way back, I scratched the soils of the earth between hidden divisions and a blindness to the desert. But they never really caught me. My gut says they never will. Last time I checked, I was still standing, always on some windowsill. just too many demands. With the wings that I melted, they could grow back again. The night's still not over, the wheel is still in spin, and they never really caught me. My gut said they never will. Last time I checked, I was still standing, always on some windowsill. Yeah, they never really caught me.
Unfortunately, I got my timings wrong. That is Pigeon Millers and their current single.
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
That would be me. Delighted that you could join me this evening, and welcome to the second part of the programme, Live on Eire, the Irish programme. On air every Wednesday between 7 and 9. Of course, if you're in Ireland or the UK, it's between 6 and 8. But sure, whatever time it is that you get to listen to it, you might even listen to Frank Sadlier now is a regular listener, and he listens back on the catch-up on TRE.radio. And Frank, good evening or good morning or good afternoon, whatever time you happen to be listening to this. And don't forget, if you miss Live on Eire on the Wednesday when we do it live, well, sure, you can catch up with it on the catch-up. But as well as that, if you don't want to do that, you can tune your radio or your smart speaker or your your computer or whatever it is you want to TRE on a Sunday evening, because between 8 and 10, this programme will be repeated. So there you go. Little bit of information for you. And don't forget our contact details if you would like to get in contact with us is +34. This is for the WhatsApp machine, +34 645 99 67 95. Or you can send an email to studio@tre.radio. I am back in Spain. You could kind of say I brought the weather with me because we're expecting thunderstorms tomorrow and Friday. It's going to be kind of overcast and a bit dodgy, drizzly, I think, on Saturday. And then we're expecting thunderstorms again on Sunday. So there you go. Melanie Lynch is going to join me in this hour of the programme, and I'm very much looking forward to chatting with Melanie. Melanie is from a project called Her Story, and we'll find out more about that when we talk to her. But one of the initiatives that Her Story is involved in is something that caught my eye, particularly during the 25th anniversary, I suppose, celebrations, you could say, or the marking of the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. It's an exhibition called Peace Heroines Exhibition. And it caught my eye, and I made contact, and Melanie got back to me, and we're going to have a chat this evening. So I'm looking forward to that. This is all about women who played such a pivotal role, sometimes behind the scenes, but occasionally to the fore. But without them, the deal, they reckon, wouldn't have got across the line. And having heard some of the stories that were told around the time of the anniversary, I very much agree that it may not have happened. Actually, speaking of the North, a public inquiry into the upgrade of one of Ireland's most dangerous roads got underway in County Tyrone yesterday. The A5 links Donegal and the northwest to Dublin. It runs through counties Derry and Tyrone to the border at Auchnacloy. At least 47 people have died along that stretch of road since it was approved for an upgrade in 2007. At that time, the Stormont Assembly approved a project to upgrade the entire 93-kilometre road to a dual carriageway. The scheme is backed by all the main political parties in Northern Ireland. The first phase of construction was due to begin in 2018, but the scheme has been mired in planning and legal challenges ever since and has gone nowhere. And as I said, 47 lives have been lost since then. on that road. The costs have also spiralled from an estimated £800 million to £1.6 billion in the intervening years. People who have lost family members on the road were among those gathered outside the venue to lobby for the scheme. Commissioner Gareth Kerr, who chaired the inquiry, told participants that he is painfully aware that the A5 scheme has been trapped for more than a decade in a cycle of information gathering, public consultation and abortive decision making. He said that the tribunal intended to present the department with clear, robust recommendations on all key issues so that it can make and implement firm decisions and bring this saga to an end. As the A5 is the main road link between Donegal and Monaghan, where it joins the N2 to Dublin, the Irish government initially had pledged to pay half the cost, but that financial commitment was later reduced to 75 million. Remember, they had initially said that they'd pay half, which was 400 million. And then that was reduced to 75 million. And during leaders' questions in the Dáil, Sinn Féin TD Pearse Doherty, who attended the opening of the inquiry yesterday, asked Minister for Finance Michael McGrath to commit to the 50-50 funding agreement. The minister did not give a commitment, but reiterated the government's support for the project and said it wouldn't be found wanting when the project has gone through all of the statutory processes. So let's, I suppose, cross our fingers and hope for the best on that. Here's an interesting one that I came across as well. Council management in Kerry have rejected a move to remove the protected status from St. Finnan's former psychiatric hospital in Killarney to facilitate housing. Killarney has a severe shortage of housing land and large waiting lists for social and affordable housing. Currently, there is no emergency accommodation for local families facing eviction. Removing the protected status of the huge idle Victorian building on a strategic site overlooking Killarney would allow the building to be converted more easily into apartments and the surrounding 20 or so acres of land to be used. This was raised at the April meeting of Kerry County Council, where the motion to delist received strong support from local councillors. However, the removal of the Gothic-style Victorian building from legislation to protect its architecture could not be conscientiously considered, Paul Neary, Acting Director of Planning, said in a report brought back to the May meeting, which happened yesterday, rejecting the move. Built at the end of the famine, St. Finnan's was an outstanding example of the Gothic revival style. It is beautiful. I've seen pictures of it online. It was designed by Woodward and Dean, the architects who also designed Queen's College, University College Cork, the Kildare Street Club, the museum at Trinity College, and the University Museum at Oxford. It was of national importance and also enjoyed Council of Europe protection under the Granada Convention, Mr. Neary outlined. It was also of social significance, demonstrating the beginning of industrial care for those in need, he said. Institutional, not industrial. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. Internal works could be carried out to the layout, Mr. Neary also said. The Land Development Agency is looking at it, but the estimates to refurbish the building, a conservative €100 million. That's what they reckon. That's what he told the meeting yesterday. But independent Killarney councillor Brendan Cronin, who moved the motion to consider removing the building's protected status, said that St. Finnan's had remained idle since 2012 and the monstrous building was financially toxic. Nobody had shown any interest in the HSE-owned building, Mr. Cronin said. Now, the building is stuck with its preservation order. HSE will only sell the surrounding land with the building as well. So that's it. You can't divide the two. In 20 years' time, we're going to be left with a monstrous decaying building overlooking the town, he said. So 1,500 people were on the approved social housing list in Killarney Municipal District, Mr. Cronin said. No land was available for house building because Killarney was surrounded by the National Park and a golf course. He also referred to its difficult history, saying at one stage 1,100 people had been confined in the building and Ireland had held more people in mental institutions than other countries. Expressing his disappointment, but not surprised, the trees were not being distinguished from the wood, and the priority should be the present pressure for housing, not the past, Mr. Cronin also said. Only Sinn Féin councillor Cathal Foley had objected to the delisting move on the grounds of the building's historical significance. In a separate statement recently, the HSE said that they have arranged for a current valuation of St. Finnan's Hospital site by the State Claims Agency, and this was awaited. Kerry County Council has confirmed that they wish to acquire 5.77 acres to the north of the ring road in Ballydribine. In parallel to the above, a new community nursing unit is being delivered through public-private partnership on lands fairly close to St. Finnan's. I looked at the building. It would be a shame. It really would. And I know that there is a lot of people, or there are a lot of people maybe who could, if there was some kind of a deal could be done with the HSE to build on the land, but to conserve that building, because, you know, it really is beautiful and it's part of history and part of heritage. And, you know, it'd be nice if it could be done, wouldn't it? It certainly would. I think it's time for some music. What do you think? I'm going to get myself organised to have a chat with Melanie Lynch. She from Her Story. We'll find out more about that later. Here's a beautiful singing voice, a lady called Karen Casey.
A woman came carrying 9 apples of gold on a bough. She sang her tune and springtime in, how sweetly the apples sing, how sweetly the apples sing. A woman came carrying a tune on the wind that dangled upon the bough. The branches shake and music make, how sweetly the apples sing, how sweetly the apples sing. Hear how the music it heals. Hear how the music it heals. A woman came carrying a basket of bread, a basket of food was her load. She put the bread in the hands of the hungry and tired. How sweetly the apples sing, how sweetly the apples sing. A woman came carrying a heart full of love, loving with all of her might. Her pilgrim soul, it burns so bright, how sweetly the apple sings, how sweetly the apple sings. Hear how the music it heals. Hear how the music it heals. My apple tree, my brightness, my apple tree, a star. My apple tree, my brightness.
beautiful? What a pure voice. Karen Casey. That's the birds. No, they're not the same birds that were tweeting when Howard was on earlier on. You could hear the birds outside. And that reminded me to kind of fortify this place, because there's a big Alsatian lives just overhead. When he gets cross, the whole world hears about it. And there's a dog living next door. And when he gets excited about going for a walk, he just barks and barks and barks as well. The chances we take with live radio. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. Melanie Lynch is all lined up and ready to rock and roll. Melanie from Her Story. And we're going to be talking about the Peace Heroines exhibition. But first, as I said, I have to take a very quick break. Come back to me in just a moment, please.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
TRE.
Talk Radio Europe.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
A couple of weeks ago, well, in fact, it's almost more than a couple of weeks ago, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the signing of the Good Friday, or the Belfast Agreement. And around that time, I came across a piece on the Peace Heroines. And then I found the Peace Heroines exhibition, and I thought that'd be nice to talk about. And then I spotted something about Her Story. And Her Story is one of the partners involved in the Peace Heroines exhibition. They've teamed up with the National Museums Northern Ireland and the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs for the Peace Heroines exhibition. Her Story is actually probably a big part of this, because that's an initiative from Her Story. And the founder and CEO and creative director of Her Story is Melanie Lynch. And she joins me via Zoom today. Melanie, it's lovely to talk to you. And thank you for agreeing to talk to us. How are you?
I'm great. And listen, thanks so much for having me. It's fantastic to hear that, you know, the Peace Heroines and Her Story is gaining international traction and hopefully inspiring lots more peace activists around the world, because we know that, you know, you can learn so much. The local is global. We can learn so much from these brilliant women.
I learned that years ago. What do they say? Think locally, act globally, or think globally, act locally.
Yeah.
It kind of sums it up nicely.
Yeah, we do.
Before we talk about the Peace Heroines and how that links into the signing of the Good Friday, well, the celebrations of the signing of the Good Friday and all that, talk to me about Her Story. This is a multi-platform storytelling initiative.
Yeah, it is. I started it back in 2016 because I found a series of women's stories that I'd never heard of before, that I suppose we hadn't, you know, learned about in the school curriculum. And I thought, God, this is such a pity. These are really authentic female role models that our young girls should have today. And I suppose my background's in communications and the academic research, for the most part, there's lots there. There's so many stories. It's just how you then bridge the gap and bring that into the public awareness, into popular culture, into the school curriculum. So I started Her Story. Actually, funny, looking back, I was planning to just do an exhibition and return to the rat race. My background's in advertising communication, so I thought I'd do something small and beautiful and brilliant, and then pull a runner. And then 7 years later, here I am.
Right.
We've made TV to the RT and animations. This is our second exhibition with the Department of Foreign Affairs. We campaigned to make Bridges Day a national holiday, which was a big success. Took 3 years. I thought it would take 10, but we did it in 3 years. So yeah, so it's a spirited little movement, which is it's got its own momentum. Sometimes it bolts on me, and I've got to pull the reins back on it. And
that's all right. So you started with this. It wasn't even a small idea. It was an idea, but it was just, now when you look back on it and what you've done, it was a small thing. So what was it about what you did then that grabbed you and made you think, well, hang on, I can't stop there?
Oh, it was just the sheer scale of the discoveries. Like, I mean, Her Story was a few months old, and I sat down with the Royal Irish Academy, and they said, look, we've got something to tell you. We decided to count the number of women in the Dictionary of Irish Biography. And you have to be pretty amazing to get on in the dictionary. Like, any of those women could be on the school curriculum. And they had over 1,000 women's stories already there.
Okay.
At the same time, the school curriculum has about 5 women. If you ask students, they can name about 5 women across the whole school curriculum.
Okay.
So I thought, oh my God, the scale of this discovery. And like, that dictionary is not exhaustive. Like, there's countless names missing. This is just Ireland alone. I thought, God, I really in my head thinking, oh, Ireland must be particularly bad. You know, we've got such a bad reputation with the mother and baby homes and the Magdalen laundries and how we've abused women, particularly in the last 100 years. And I reached out to academics in Oxford University and belonged. And And they said, no, other countries are just as bad. So this kind of global amnesia of women's stories, historical, mythological, and contemporary, modern women as well, it's an interesting quandary, really, you know. But it definitely takes a multidisciplinary approach to really engage. You want to capture people's imaginations across all of society, ideally, and men too. Like we have as many men supporting her story as women. Her story godfathers, I call them. I've actually experienced more toxic femininity.
Right.
Toxic masculinity. I seem to be the only person using the term toxic femininity.
Right.
I could write a book about it, to be honest. Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose I'm the unlikely feminist. I was bullied out of an all-girls Catholic convent and I escaped to the mixed school, which was also Protestant, where women can be bishops and stuff. So that was great. Yeah. So I am the unlikely person to run this project in a lot of ways, but maybe that's a good thing too. You know, I think we have to, you know, if you want to move beyond the patriarchal era, we have to really look at our shadow across the gender spectrum, and it's not all men's fault. That's just not how it works. You know, women have shadow too, and you know, when things are out of balance and out of whack, everybody suffers.
Okay.
And everyone's shadow, we're only human. So yeah.
I'm going to we'll give out the address, your website address as well, obviously, as we go along. But when you do look at the website, you get a kind of a sense and a flavour as to what you do. But for now, for people that are sitting at home or maybe driving in their car or maybe sitting on the beach at this stage still, let me ask you, is it all about historical women? Is it about the stamp that women have put on society? Or do you look at women who are currently doing that or trying to do that?
Oh no, yeah, there's modern women included, very much so as well, living and breathing modern women, and mythological women too. I think that's very important. Irish mythology is full of authentic badass role models. Of course, the most formidable women are the most hidden, so you really have to dig to find them. But like the first mythological woman or person actually who ever landed in Ireland was Cessair. And she travelled all across the known world, from Sudan, all across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, North Africa, to come to Ireland. And that book it's actually recorded in Laura Goalia Eire, the Book of Invasions. Of course, not taught in the school curriculum. If you go into the schools, though, and you tell the story, the kids love it. They just think this is badass. It makes Homer's Odyssey look tame.
Okay.
The role of this one woman who needed 3 men and 50 women to populate all of Ireland. So, yeah, that's an amazing story.
And
just an example. Of Queen Maeve and like Grania of the Sorrows and like these kind of, I suppose, very stereotypical female roles, you know, like the toxic feminine Maeve, and then Grania of Sorrows, the beautiful damsel in distress, you know, whereas actually there are much more complex, interesting characters too when you dig to find them. So, yeah, it's been quite a process. There's no shortage of stories. Like, you know, this could be never ending.
All right. Peace heroines. Where did the idea come from?
So I was sitting down with Ireland's then ambassador to the UN, Geraldine Nason-Byrne, back in 2019 in her office in New York. And she told me that the role of the women in the peace process in Northern Ireland is a key United Nations case study. That peace delegations all around the world, from Colombia to the Congo, learn about the role of women in Northern Ireland. And I thought, this is so bizarre. I didn't know this. I don't know their stories. And we definitely don't teach this in the curriculum back home. And I reached out, I returned home, I reached out to our contacts, and lo and behold, they confirmed it isn't taught in the curriculum. Nobody seems to know this is the case. But yet at the UN, everybody talks about it. I've got to bridge the gap. Yet again, it's like the comms head comes in and goes, I can't ignore this story. And then I reached out to National Museums of Northern Ireland, and the head of curation there, Hannah Crowdy, she got behind the project in 24 hours. She said, we have to make this happen. I have to confess now, when I wrote the funding application, I didn't know the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement was coming up.
Really?
That was just serendipitous. Yeah, we had a call with Monica McWilliams, one of our advisors. She's like, Melanie, your timing is spot on. I said, what do you mean? So yeah, that was just all alignment, and very much of its time, because traditionally in the past, actually, the women's stories have been reduced to a footnote and hardly mentioned at all at the big anniversary events. Because when you look at the official records of the peace process, the photographs in the newspapers, you know, that made the headlines around the time of the signing, it's men in suits, politicians shaking hands. But actually, the women had been working together and actually hugging each other. It's one of my favourite quotes from the exhibition, Eileen Weir from the Shankill Road. she says, we weren't shaking hands, we were hugging each other. And we've been hugging each other for decades before that. And no matter how bad it got down the Falls in Shankill, which is like the epicenter, one of the epicenters of the Troubles, no matter how bad it got down those communities during the Troubles, the women in those centres never stopped working together. And that's a story that's not told. And like, if you were to rewrite the narrative and change the front page of the papers, wouldn't that just be, or like, look what else happened, but these women like have a legacy of working together for actually centuries before that, women working together for the suffrage movement and for trade unionism, for women's rights. So they had a legacy of coming together, setting aside their sectarian, religious, political differences and focusing on the bigger picture, which is, I think it's a really important story to tell. So that's why we decided to do the exhibition. But, when you're trying to engage young people, you have to be really innovative and brave, I think, in the curation. So it's not a traditional official Ireland exhibition. I commissioned the brilliant graffiti artist, she's a mural artist, Fritz, to make these huge, larger than life portraits. So they're 6 foot tall portraits, spray painted murals. We've got the permission from 8 councils in Northern Ireland now to turn these canvas portraits into ginormous street murals.
Brilliant.
We just need to get the funding for it. But the idea there is that when young kids are walking to school in the morning, they walk past these murals and they learn about these women's stories, and they grow up knowing about the stories, keeping the stories alive in the hearts of the community, because that's where real peace work happens. It's not shaking hands.
It's not at national level. No.
That's less than 1% of it. Then you actually have to, like, you've got the Good Friday Agreement, fantastic. Then you have to implement it. And then peace is not an event, like, it's a process. That's the quote that they kept saying to us on the day, up in Queen's there. I was at the conference. It is a process, and it's a never ending process, to be honest. 25 years on, there's so much work that needs to be done. And there still is a lot of division in the North,
Let me ask you about I'm sorry for cutting across you. Just talking about the anniversary. What was your analysis of the amount of coverage that the women and the work, the huge role that they played in the process leading up to it, and indeed, I suppose, when it came down to brass tacks? Were you happy with the credit that the women, particularly the likes of the Women's Coalition, got when we marked the 25th anniversary?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a huge shift this anniversary.
Okay.
And Monica McWilliams confirmed that she'd never seen so much traction focus on the women's stories. Well, I suppose I find a little bit frustrating, and one of the reasons why we curated this exhibition and captured the diversity of women's stories and experiences is because typically the media can get quite lazy. And they'll just tell one woman's story, or maybe two, and typically it's always Mo Mowlam.
Yes.
Which is deserved. She was absolutely off the Richter scale extraordinary.
She was.
Really exceptional individual, such a humane person with incredible people skills. If it wasn't for her, there wouldn't be an agreement, But the reality is there's so many women doing the work on the ground 25 years ago. But today, like, the women are still active, not just in Northern Ireland, but like they are advisors and role models for peace processes all around the world, like the likes of Bona Hines, Monica Williams. They're flying out from Sudan to Palestine to Syria, Colombia, Congo, they're very active. And so, yes, it was great to see the coverage, but I think the media still get lazy. And that was our point. Well, I suppose I looked at like the diversity of stories that we wanted to capture, and the women who typically get 95% of the coverage get 10% of the coverage in our exhibition.
Okay.
So it's really about cracking the box wide open. And that's something I've always seen with women's stories. Like, if they are in the media, it's the token woman or the token 2 or 3, and it's always the same names.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always asking, like, whose story is missing and how does that story challenge the narrative? Like, the role of, like, say, Karen Doherty, she's a young writer. She's my age. And she talks about healing from her trauma through nature writing and through Irish mythology and the Irish language. And she comes from a mixed heritage background. So she's got one parent who's Protestant, one parent who's Catholic. She's lived in the Bogside and the Waterside in Derry. She's got that dual experience, but she wants to go in through nature to heal. And her writing is absolutely exquisite. It just shows you what's possible, Okay. It's really important to platform those kind of voices that can offer a different perspective, a new way of seeing and doing things. And then there's the role of dairy girls. Like, whoever thought that, comedy could be so cathartic and create moments for real deep healing and a safe space to talk about some of the darkest memories of the Troubles. It's so profound, incredibly well written,
All right. If I go to the exhibition, what do I get when I walk in?
28. Yeah, I got a bit carried away. So there's a 28 panel educational exhibition that features the stories of 30 individual women and then collectives, like the special dynamic between the Falls and Shankill Women's Centres, the Women's Coalition, Women Together, the Peace People. Mairead Corrigan and Betty Williams, of course, have to be there too. And then the work of peace players working together today, the Dairy Girls, the incredible work of the Wave Trauma Centre. And then also there's international peace heroines from different conflict zones around the world and what we can learn from them. I have to say, hats off. First prize goes to the women of Liberia.
Yeah.
Cleverest peace strategy I've ever heard. They banned sex. They went on sex strike.
That'll do it.
And it worked. They stopped the civil war. All the men and the women of Liberia, they said, okay, this is it now. There'll be no sex until there's peace. And I just think it's such a beautiful insight into humanity, that actually we are more driven for love than for war. And they won the Nobel Prize for it. I think hats off. Everybody needs to learn from that story. And if only the women of Russia and Ukraine were listening today. God, because when we unite together like that, that's the power of grassroots activism. And peace processes, they're bottom up, they're not top down. That's a great misunderstanding that people seem to have. Like, it's on the ground every day doing this brilliant work, beyond the divisions, beyond so many unnecessary separations, in our consciousness. But a lot of it's in the head, it's not in the heart.
When did the exhibition start, and where did it start, and where has it travelled to date?
Yeah, so it started in Stormont. We launched it in the Northern Ireland Assembly back on the 21st of September last year, which is the International Day of Peace. Very cathartic event, and great fun actually for the Southern Irish who were in the room. They couldn't get their head around why the Northern Irish women were laughing. And I said, look, you'll get used to it. It's dark humour. And I think Dairy Girls is really true to Northern Irish humour, actually.
Okay.
They have a brilliant, brilliant sense of humour. And it was so important for them to have humour as a way of coping, but also surviving and thriving through very difficult times. So from Stormont, then it's travelled. It's been at the United Nations headquarters in New York, the US Congress in Washington, DC, the London Embassy, and Derry Tower Museum, Enniskillen Castle, where it is currently, Glencree Centre for Peace and Reconciliation, and Dundalk County Museum.
Wow.
And I'm sure there's more I'm forgetting now. But yeah, it's been on a big tour. It's going to continue travelling. It's fully booked up now nearly to the end of 2024.
Okay.
And I'd love to see it continue to tour until the 30th anniversary.
The areas that you mentioned, Washington, New York, I think you mentioned, was it London in there as well? They're all traditionally great Irish strongholds. There'd be great Irish support in those areas. Would you be taking this to anywhere like Spain, for instance, or would you be taking it to France or Germany or anywhere else? Is that on the cards to kind of show what can be done when you put your head together, when you put the ladies' heads together?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be lovely, definitely as a goal in the long term. But right now, the priority is to keep it in the north where it needs to be, because the situation in the north is quite tense.
Okay.
Brexit has really threatened the peace process there. So we're getting, requests from Galway and Kerry and Cork to host the exhibition. But I said, look, you can't have it till 2025 because it needs to stay up the north. We only have one copy of it printed. I mean, ideally, if we can get a second copy printed for the rest of Europe, that would be fantastic. And that's maybe something that the Department of Foreign Affairs would look to do. There is another copy of it printed in Washington. So that's the copy that's printing across, or so rather it's touring across America there. Okay. But it's just logistics. And I suppose had it not been for the fact that the situation in the north is so tense, I would have set her free, to tour across Europe earlier. But yeah, that's the challenge, with limited resources.
Has there been different reaction in the different areas that you would maybe bring it to in Ireland? And then does that even differ again from what you might have in New York and maybe Britain and in Washington and various places like that? Different reactions? And can you give us a sense of what people are saying?
We were quite surprised actually at just the overwhelmingly positive response, because when you're telling conflict histories, and this is like a civil war history effectively, it can be traumatizing, and be very careful about re-traumatizing people and very sensitive to their experiences. So there's a very fine line to dance between telling history and telling it accurately. If you don't do that, the history is a very bad habit of repeating itself. Look at Brexit. But also, if you do tell it accurately and in the depths and the darkness of it all, there's a risk. I always fear of conditioning young people that this is the best they can expect from humanity. So we have a brilliant educational psychologist that we work with, and we talk through our processes and how we present the story. So the reality is very much there in the stories of what happened and just how terrifying and how bad it was. And these women did face, constant death threats. They were attacked and they survived miraculously in some cases, So we felt we had to honor the truth, but you leave feeling uplifted. You had to leave feeling empowered. And that was a very conscious process that we went on. And it's worked, surprisingly so. I was waiting for more negative feedback. It's only understandable when people are triggered when there's difficult memories there. And as Ulster Museum, explained to us, we have a shared history, but we don't have a shared memory. That's very different.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. I know time is pushing on, but I'd like to get a sense, maybe you mentioned one or two already, but talk to me about maybe one or two of the ladies or women that we don't know about, or we maybe not have heard too much about, that are featured in the exhibition.
Well, the woman who comes first to mind actually is inspired by the Queen's University Agreement 25 conference, which I was lucky enough to attend. They actually hosted our exhibition at the conference, and Bill Clinton was there, and Hillary and Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern and all the big names. And of course, Senator George Mitchell gave a very powerful speech. I actually witnessed grown men wipe tears from their eyes. In particular, this anecdote that I'm going to share with you, it's incredibly moving. He has acute leukemia. His doctor told him not to fly.
That's right.
He'd still got on that flight. 89 years of age, very brilliant man. And he told the story of his wife and her role, which I'd never heard of before.
Go on.
Yeah, he said that within a year and a half into the negotiations, and for our listeners who aren't aware, it was Senator George Mitchell who actually chaired the talk. So, it was really on his head whether they would be a success or not. Within a year and a half into the talks, he said they were getting nowhere. It was just bickering over and back. Each side was more focused on what they could win for their community than actually focusing on the bigger picture, which was peace. And he was at his wit's end. He had to fly back to America. His wife was giving birth to their son. And he decided he was going to call a meeting with President Clinton and his team to hand in his resignation, to call it quits. And he had a long chat with his wife in the hospital, and she asked him how many babies were born in Northern Ireland today. I even didn't catch him telling the story. And they found out, and he said there's 62 children born today in Northern Ireland. And she said, you have to go back and look after those 62 children. I look after our son.
Fabulous, isn't it?
It's an amazing story.
Yeah,
and I've never heard that before. And she was there on the stage with them and standing ovation together, But what a brilliant woman, and what a brilliant man, and a great partnership of equals. So that was one of my favourite stories now that I hadn't heard of before.
Okay.
And I love the dynamic between Eileen Weir and Susan McCrory from the Falls and Shankill Women's Centres. Like, these are women on the ground, the grassroots activists who are so dedicated to peace, like the most unlikely friendship, and yet they're the bestest of friends. They're thick as thieves, the two of them. And I've been lucky enough to share quality time with them. Actually, I'll give you an anecdote of just the power of what they personally did to me. I had palpitations for 6 months, as many did after COVID. And like, nothing could cure these palpitations. And I went to the hospital and they said, look, we can't stop them, but there's something seriously wrong with your heart. But good luck, basically.
Yeah. Take your chances.
Try meditate. She actually, in fairness, the doctor said to me, like, you could try and meditate more, or like, go for quiet walks in nature. Nothing was stopping these palpitations. So I go up to Northern Ireland, I go up to Belfast, and I convinced Susan and Eileen to let us interview them. We filmed them for the day.
Right.
And they literally reset my heartbeat.
You're kidding.
Yeah. They fixed like literally my heartbeat perfectly for months. Yeah.
Why? How?
Because it's the power of these women. They're just hugely compassionate, courageous, authentic women. You can feel it when you walk in the room. They're the real deal. And they're the best of humanity, you know. Formidably brilliant. Like Eileen now would be one of my all-time favourites. Like she was in the UDA when she was a teenager. She said, Melanie, I had no time for discos on a Saturday night. I was making petrol bombs. And she left the UDA because she started to see through their propaganda. And she went on to become a legendary peace activist. Like she's won the same awards as John Hume, but like most people in Northern Ireland have never heard her name before. And she is an exceptional person. She's very brilliant, very real. She doesn't really like these commemorative events. She's too busy getting on with the actual work of doing the work on the ground. She doesn't want to talk about it. She wants to do it like a true activist. Like they don't look for the spotlight, these women. They want to get on with the job. You know.
Do you think that women are better at this than men then?
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think men and women bring different skills and attributes to the table. But if you look at, say, some of the men who had a very brilliant role in the peace process, they had really strong, what you could say, feminine attributes. Like John Hume and George Mitchell, like these were very heart-centered men. They were very compassionate men. They had incredible emotional intelligence. So I think peace work, you need a balance of both to do the job. I think there's definitely learnings from the role of women. I mean, there are case studies on it. Like, you know, the UN have crunched the data. Like the fact is when women are involved in peace processes, they're much more likely to survive beyond 15 years. Typically peace processes collapse within 10 years. That's why what Northern Ireland has is so special. And that's why you had 2 US presidents flying over in the space of 10 days, because the world is watching. Like Northern Ireland is a very rare exception to the rule. Okay. And I think the women in Northern Ireland, like the key things that they really focused on was integrated education, which I think should be the number one focus, because we know it works, especially for the long term. Integrated communities and, you know, victim support for survivors was a huge part of the healing process too. So they have it's a more collaborative and holistic approach to peace, which is the way it has to be, you know.
When we were talking about her story, you were constantly talking about the curriculum and about schools and about education. How is this being brought to schools, and how is this, or are you working on trying to bring it to schools and get this information on the curriculum and educate the younger people so that they see the bigger picture?
Yeah, so we were very lucky. We just received good news there. Was it last month that the Department of Foreign Affairs are giving us a grant to turn this exhibition into a legacy education resource for schools. So Great. We turn into a digital interactive exhibition online for free and circulated to all schools on the island with supporting lesson plans. So it'll be integrated into the curriculum. And we're working with the Nerve Centre in Belfast, who are renowned at creating these brilliant school resources. So that'll be ready to launch from the first week of October. And then it'll be available for anybody to access online, which will be super. And for the United Nations as well, to learn as an adult education tool around the world. So it's great. Like the power of digital these days, there's no stopping, you know, in terms of sharing resources and insights and tools. So we're thrilled about that, because that can be a big frustration, you know, when you create these resources, they then go into storage. When it's a printed exhibition, like it's fantastic. It creates a moment for people to come together, to tell the stories, to recommit to peace. But then inevitably it'll go into storage at some stage, you know, and come out for anniversary events. Whereas with the digital exhibition, it'll live on. There'll be no limit to it, you know.
Let me ask you about the portraits. Did people sit for these, or were the portraits done from other pictures?
They were done from other pictures, actually, yeah. And we had a conversation, myself and Frizz, the artist, about how we were going to create these portraits and why they had to be larger than life, because I suppose the women have been so forgotten in the story, reduced to a footnote. And we were also quite frustrated with, I suppose, history often being presented as somewhat black and white. Like there's this definitive narrative of history, which is what we didn't set out to do actually in this exhibition. There is no definitive timeline. That proved highly contentious when we tried to do it. So we focused on the diversity of women's stories, and that proved to be healing, which I thought was such a big learning for us, actually. I don't think the way that history is necessarily taught in school books is the way to go. It doesn't reflect the reality of what happens, and the diversity of experiences is very hard to capture at all. But with these women's portraits, we thought, well, history isn't black and white, and they're not pastel women. There's nothing pastel about them. Huge sensitivity to the use of colour in Northern Ireland. So,
of course.
Yeah. So, and there's that rules out 4 colours typically. That's green, signified Catholic nationalist. And then for Unionist, Loyalist, Protestant, it's orange, blue, and red.
Yeah.
So I suppose we looked at the women's stories and we thought, well, these women never put themselves in a box. They didn't choose a side. So we're going to use all the sensitive colours. So every single portrait has all those 4 colours in them. And there's been no backlash.
So far.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Oh, we'd have it by now.
You're long enough working in the communications and media business to know that there's always someone lurking somewhere down the road, around the corner. Listen, it's been fascinating. And before we went on air, we said we could chat probably for a very, very long time about this. And we've chatted for a good period of time. And I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Going back to the original conversation, Her Story, the website is herstory.ie, and you will find lots of information in there, including a big section on the piece, heroines, and the exhibition, and so on. Listen, Melanie, it's been lovely talking to you, the founder, CEO, and creative director of Her Story, and I suppose probably the brains behind the piece, heroines as well, and the exhibition. Thank you for the information, and please feel free to give us a shout at any stage, and if we can help in any way by promoting anything, we certainly will.
Thank you so much, Ger. It's been an absolute pleasure.
They're from Belfast, Rio McGuinness and Gerard Sands. And their stage name or their group name is Dark Topics. I Bet You Can. That's what it's called. Nice one, isn't it? I thought it was smashing. And appropriate, I suppose, to play that coming out of the conversation with Melanie. Thank you very much, Melanie. Good to chat with you. And herstory.ie is the website address again. A national database has been launched with details of 44 unidentified remains in the hope that it will help families of missing persons get answers. This is great. The information was collected from coroners across the country and published on the database yesterday, the first of its kind in Ireland. DNA profiles for 28 of the 44 are on the National DNA Database. And the Department of Justice said it plans to arrange for samples of the remaining 16 unidentified remains to be attained where possible. The Department of Justice said that there are approximately 856 unsolved missing person cases on the Garda Pulse system at the moment. The database contains details about where and when the remains were found and other information that may jog memories, including tattoos, clothes and other items. Family members of missing people have been encouraged to provide DNA samples for Forensic Science Ireland to help solve the cases. I like that. A new report by the Climate and Health Alliance has suggested that the Irish diet and food system is like a slow motion disaster, fueling premature death and disability due to diet-related chronic diseases. The report calls for the ending of the junk food cycle and a switch away from processed foods to more plant-based diets. The global food system can feed the world, but it has also made people heavier and sicker, and it destroys wildlife, pollutes rivers and air, and is responsible for a third of greenhouse gas emissions, according to the report. Now, there is concern that ultra-processed foods and excessive red and processed meats are dominating the Irish diet at the expense of fruit, vegetables, plant proteins, whole grains, and sustainable seafood. The Alliance has called for a greater cabinet subcommittee, for a special cabinet subcommittee to oversee a food revolution and for the farming industry to be a key part of the solution. Orna O'Brien, a dietitian with the Irish Heart Foundation, said that the playbook for smoking needs to be applied to junk food, which she says would restrict the marketing and promotion of junk foods. She called for policy and structural changes to be implemented to encourage consumers to buy less processed food. Junk foods should be made more expensive and inaccessible, she said, and stressed that such a move is not about punishing individuals for buying processed food, but a mandatory reformation of processed food to make them lower in salt, sugar and fat. However, she added overall, a move back to a less processed food system is definitely necessary. So there we go. How long do we have left? Hopefully enough to get this in. This was gone on release since today only. It's from Your Cuz Marcus. Yeah, seriously. Your Cuz.
I came here across the water. I don't have much to my name. I put some whiskey in a bottle. Hope I don't lose it all the same. One foot out and one foot in. Won't you lay here with me, baby? Feel the shiver of the winter. Feel the warmth of better days. All my friends are getting older. I feel younger by the sea. That's where I spent most my summers. All the daffodils and me. In the water I would swim. It feels like homecoming. I'm coming home, I'm coming home. Most of the week I am stuck in my head. Most of the weekend I'm out of my mind. Once in a while I get sick of myself. Once in a blue moon I think about me and you. You and I, how we came to pass some time here. And I found home in you. Home is everything. I've been sleeping in the city. I think it's time I act my age. Most my friends have moved to Sydney. I sort of wish I hadn't stayed. I don't know where to begin. Won't you stay here with me, baby? Feel the shiver of September. Feed the warmth of Adelaide. All my friends are getting sober. Maybe that's the life for me. If you're looking for some gold here, what you get is what you see. I'm just crawling in my skin. It feels like homecoming. I don't know where to do it, you know. Most of the week I am stuck in my head. Most of the weekend I'm out of my mind. Once in a while I get sick of myself. Once in a blue moon I think about me and you. You and I, how we came to pass some time here. And I found home in you. Home is everything.
That is the brand new single from Your Cuz Marcus. It was only released this morning, and it's a song that's called Homecoming. I don't have time to give you the reason for writing that song and his thoughts and so on. I want to say a big thank you to my two guests on the programme today. Well, regular contributor Patricia Traynor for her story about Galway, the city of the tribes, the county of the tribes, and to Melanie Lynch from her story, talking to us about the Peace Heroines exhibition. As always, I want to say thank you to our Spanish-Irish cultural advisor on the programme, Antonio Sierra. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next Wednesday for another Live on Eire. From me, Ger Sweeney. Bye-bye and thanks.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit TRE.radio.